Recording. Hello and happy Tuesday. I certainly appreciate everyone taking the time to join us on this Thanksgiving week. My name is Daryl Good and I'm in institutional partnerships here at Upswing. I've been in higher education for the last 13 years. And again, just thanks for joining us. Now, here are just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We'll take some time at the end of this presentation to hear any questions or comments, or if we want to have a discussion, we certainly can. But here at Upswing, we are on a mission to end a Now, throughout Upswing's journey, we have gained the support of the fantastic partners listed here. Now, while I'm certain that we would have ended up in the same spot, having them be a part of this Upswing journey has certainly made the trip a lot more fun, a lot more interesting. And I think we just kind of got to the end, or not necessarily the end, but we've gotten to where we are a little bit faster than if we would have just set out on our own. We all need a little help sometimes, which is, again, kind of one of the reasons that Upswing was founded. Now, before we jump into the topic of today's discussion, I think it's important to know what type of students that we deliberately set out to impact. We were founded on the principle that we wanted to provide much needed support for impacted students. Here you'll see a breakdown of the types of students who regularly utilize the Upswing platform. Now, today's discussion, we will be covering how Upswing helps its partners to provide holistic support to their students. Throughout the pandemic, we have all heard how higher education needs to change to provide holistic education to students, but oftentimes we don't hear as much about the support piece. We hope that you leave this talk with ideas to supplement your current support plan and possibly even consider partnering with Upswing to achieve these goals together. Now, there's change that we've ever seen in higher education. The good thing is that we now have tons of data to really make decisions that impact our institutions and students in a positive way. GPAs and retention are no longer the sole measurement for student success. I want to share some data that you may have already seen, but I think it's important to take a little deeper look. The one thing, excuse me, in this study, this is looking at the state of student success and engagement in higher education, and this was put out by Canvas. Now, the one thing I really like about this study is that it surveyed over 7,000 students, administrators, and faculty. Now, with this, 75% of students and faculty state that holistic development is a top contributor to success. Students from lower economic classes are more than 4 times likely to experience difficulty staying engaged in online or remote learning. To me, this stat is interesting because there's always been a lot of studies done on student success within certain economic classes, but this one really talked about the engagement in online for those students in a lower economic class. The other thing that was interesting to me was there's a significant disparity between the perception of support services offered between students and faculty. So while faculty may think that they have very adequate resources, that's not always the case with students. Now, Upswing's student support promise is to provide scalable, timely support for each individual student. We do this in a number of ways. Upswing complements and integrates current institutional resources with our virtual assistant, Anna. Now, while we provide a number of academic resources, I will save those discussions for a future webinar. Today, we really want to focus in on the non-academic resources. Now, some of you may have attended a previous webinar that my colleague Jan Gilboy hosted on our virtual assistant, Anna. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I thought it would be helpful to quickly recap what Anna is and how she plays a role in holistic student support. So Anna is a virtual assistant for students of the platform. Now, We deliberately designed Anna to be text-based, not an app. She serves as a representative of your institution and is a one-stop shop for student questions. And I think probably the most valuable piece of Anna is that she is a mix of auto and human responses. So for instance, if Anna doesn't understand what a student's trying to ask and or say, it automatically kicks it over to our Anna response team, where that student will receive a message or a reply, excuse me, within an average of 7 minutes. Now, as I was looking at the numerous studies that have been released over the last year, I wanted to point out the one thing that I found interesting. Most of the studies were asking their students questions similar, to the one that you see here. The interesting part is that they were often positioned like this was groundbreaking information. The truth is that Upswing has been helping our partners gather this type of information for years now with high engagement. We have the capability to customize any message plan to any group of students within an institution. This provides our partners with the insight that they need to make the correct changes. While we think it's important to make changes, oftentimes we find institutions are making changes honestly just for the sake of doing so, but change at the right time is really what we're going after. Now, the data here is showing our monthly virtual tutoring sessions before and after the initial shutdown of the pandemic, as well as the Anna conversations across that same time period. Now, this is probably pretty consistent with what every institution saw with any of their virtual resources during that time. But when we focus in on Anna, at Upswing, we anticipated the majority of the messages from students being more logistical in nature. So, is campus open? When can I come clean out my dorm room? While we did see those types of interactions, we were amazed that a lot of the messaging was around students that fall, it was just really around the holistic student support. So we were getting questions like related to food insecurity or mental health. And honestly, sometimes students just wanted someone to listen to them and provide encouragement. I think during those times, students could certainly talk to one another. They could talk to their family members, but we all know how those types of conversations go. It's usually just both sides kind of sharing their experience. And in a lot of cases, there's not always those words of encouragement that the students need. Now, shifting gears just a little to focus solely on mental health, I wanted to go back to this Canvas study. Now, in this top line that you see here, 88% of students and faculty state that psychological well-being is a top contributor to success. Now, that stat didn't come as a surprise to me, nor did the second stat where 88% of self-identified lower socioeconomic students say that psychological well-being is crucial for student success. But the one that really jumped out to me was that 87% of those self-identified lower socioeconomic students say that psychological well-being is crucial for engagement. So obviously, standpoint and what we would traditionally consider student success for GPAs and retention, we all knew and we've always known that psychological well-being is important, but simply getting the student to engage, the mental status was really important there as well. Now, here we see the student landing page with all of their Upswing resources. As I mentioned before, we will save the academic resources for a future webinar, but I wanted to show you that the mental health support module lives directly on its homepage for easy access. Now, here you will see those mental health resources, and I chose to show you the mental health module as if the student were viewing this on their mobile device. Now, in this first image, you will see that the student has access to emergency resources. Those include 911, a mental health crisis number that the student can text, as well as a suicide prevention number. Now, the next resource that the students quick confidential mental health assessment. Now, from this assessment, they will first receive a mental health risk screener. You'll see an example of that on the right-hand side of the screen. This report is very easy to understand. It includes the risk factors from 6 key areas. The green and red gauge gives a student just a easily digestible report that will then point them to some resources that we recommend or that the assessment recommends for them to view. Now, here you will see those resources. These are quick 2-minute videos designed to explain some of the feelings that the student may be experiencing. Now, what our partners really like about this resource is that it obviously covers the big topics that we are used to hearing, such as panic attacks, anxiety, or depression, but it also covers topics that can be very specific to a student, such as elder abuse or violence with a loved one. Now, to close, I wanted to recap Upswing's approach to holistic student support. Upswing is providing its partners with a platform that connects students with the right resources at the right time. Those include both academic and non-academic support services, regardless if they're offered by Upswing or directly from the institution. Now, we have over a dozen case studies that illustrate our efficacy and impact, demonstrating that we are in fact providing results for students, and their institutions. Now, one that I'd like to highlight is Winston-Salem State University. They are an HBCU in North Carolina. They came to Upswing with a very simple goal, honestly, and that was to increase their retention rate from 78% to 81%. Now, in that time, we helped increase their retention over 11%. So Winston-Salem State is a perfect example of the impact that a holistic student support approach can have on outcomes. Now, we've discussed at length Upswing's approach to holistic student support, but I do think it's important to share the support that we provide our partners directly. A big part of that a hero is a higher education retention officer, and every partner has one. Now, they are designed to be your single point of contact from implementation all the way through to renewal. Now, all of our heroes have either been employed at an institution or have been fully trained in higher education. This gives them the perspective to provide best practices, discuss your goals, obviously discuss the data and insights from those goals, and if we're resetting goals, how do we achieve those goals together? And at last, I will leave you with a quote directly from one of our partners regarding their hero, and that is, "Thank you for the nation's history. You have been a real hero." Now, I want to thank you again for your time on this holiday week. We will now open the meeting up for questions. Now, I realize that everyone is probably pretty fatigued with virtual meetings, so please feel free to type questions in the chat. My colleague, Jan Gilboy, is going to be watching that chat, and she'll be reading those for us. And again, thanks for your time. Jan, do we have any questions in the chat at this time?
Yeah, here's one question. What does Upswing do in the event that a student texts on with a mental health emergency?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. That's a really good one, and one that we get fairly frequently. So, as you would imagine, during the time, particularly during the pandemic, we were getting a lot of responses, and we were honestly sending out a lot of messages and surveys, just kind of getting a pulse or helping our partners get a pulse on what the mental health state or some of the struggles that their students were facing. And during those conversations, we did have a number of instances, thankfully not too high of a number, but we have experienced that. And when that happens, the first thing that we do is we point the student in the direction of any mental health resources that we know the institution already provides. We begin to discuss with the student the steps in which to do that. And in tandem with that approach, we also let an admin at the institution know that this is a mental health emergency and that some intervention may be needed here. So it's one of those things we take very seriously, and we want the appropriate person at your institution to know as quickly as possible. And those are the types of things and conversations that we have before we send the first ANA message. We want to be prepared for those when they come to us, so we get the student the help that they need in the time that they need it. Great question. Thank you for that.
Sure. And then is there any feedback to the school on the assessment that students take?
Ooh, another good question. So obviously the assessment is confidential, so we're not sharing any student information because we simply don't have that student information. But within the assessment results, we can provide kind of I don't want to call it a state of the union, but we can compile that data from the institution to show our partners, what are the hot button issues. So with that information, they can make decisions that are right for them. So do we need more resources to provide to students on know that? So with this information, what can we then do to help our students get the help that they need? So what can we put in front of them? Good question.
Thank you. And then what if an institution has their own mental health resources? Can Anna, the virtual assistant, connect those resources to students?
No, I'm glad you asked that question. And I think that mental health has been one of those things that there's just, I know we've all heard it, but there's been this huge stigma around mental health, and up until really the last 2 years, it seems like. And if there's one good thing that we can say has come from the pandemic, I think it's that we're chipping away at the stigma around mental health. And what we've done with that is, or what we've seen rather, is institutions really paying attention to the resources that they can provide to students in regards to mental health. And with that, the first thing that Anna is going to do is point a student in the direction of those services offered by their institution. We not only want to serve as a resource to Upswing's mental health resources, but we really want to be that conduit between not just mental health, but all of the resources that are offered at a particular institution. So Anna can absolutely connect a student to mental health resources provided by an institution.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? I do see that and I certainly don't want to put anyone on the spot, but being a holiday week, I know that schedules can be a little bit crazy at times. There were a few people that joined late. So today we've covered the holistic student approach that Upswing provides its partners. I just wanted to take some time, just a brief moment, to pause to see if there were any questions or anything that I could cover again, because we did have a few late attendees. For those who have already sat through the presentation, but I think this is such an important topic to discuss, particularly now. If we need to go back, we certainly can. So I'll pause for just a moment. Jan, if you will watch the chat. Yeah, I think that's our best approach from this point. All right. Well, if there's nothing else coming in, please note that if you are attending and you did not have the chance to ask those questions, or if you're like me and you think about a fantastic question after the meeting is already, please feel free to reach out to us. Now, do note that this meeting has been recorded, and a copy of this recording will be available to you and sent out to you. So with that, just thank you again for your time. At this point, I will stop the recording. We will end the meeting, and I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.